Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on Saturday, September 6th, 8:30 in the morning, along with a decent dump. I wanted to get this out of the way because I swore we wouldn't continue, but everybody else continues. It's part three in the series, unfortunately, doing the John McPhee saga and the haters that are surrounding it. And we're going to frame it the right way. Finally, we talked about what's going on, framing a topic, how it works, how this is a very woke left style of doing it. They may not be woke left, but they are following woke left philosophy on how they are doing this. They are coming off of it's the t-shirt tank top guy and a couple other ones. One I think was in not in the unit, the Delta unit, whatever, with John. And once again, don't care. I will say that whatever he's convicted of, which is fine. But there are many discrepancies in there to make it look, not that it's not bad, but to add to it so that there is no comeback, as we say. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a note by note, try to do it fast because I know you guys hate to listen to shit. This was sent to me when we put the first video out, and there was some people of interest because we don't do bro vet stuff, but it was necessary because of the heat that was going on. And I'll just read this, and no, I'm not going to give you a name because that's just how everybody runs these days, and I respect people's privacy. I also am not making this up, and there is wording in there that those of you who know the system and the boys and everything else will know where would I've come up with the wording. And I'm going to skip over the very first part, which is where he's disgusted by this stuff, but agrees that this is all because of the Tim Kennedy nonsense, because McPhee would not turn around and bang Tim up a little bit more. But this other part that I'm going to mention was also came out in another video very recently from the tank top. No, it was from Nikki MGT. But we'll get to that. So they said he knows that they're going to do a show on a certain date and that they're going to try to bring up the detainee event and that it will only hurt current guys downrange just so these guys can make a few bucks. And then he mentions that he was an A Squadron guy contemporary to John McPhee. So this is just his list. You can fight whoever it is. You can hunt down the A Squadron, whoever they may be, and slap them about the face if you don't believe it. And he says about the jumping thing, he jumped with B Company 1st RGR Ranger, I guess, on 8 December 1991 into Kuwait, and it was saturated with Iraqi landmines. They were awarded combat scrolls, and it was called Operation Iris Gold. You can find it on YouTube. 2, upon finishing OTC, you are assigned to Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. So you have earned the right to say the word Special Forces. No one in unit gives a fuck about Green Berets since 90% of them would fail RASP. Whatever. Detainee story was from W and OIF commander not playing and deploying military police battalions for us, whoever, I guess whatever unit he was in at the time, to hand prisoners off to. When no WMDs were found, W was under pressure, and we were ordered to increase pressure on target and off. This is pre-Abu Ghraib. John, he was fired over telling senior officers to go fuck themselves. It was not our job to house, feed, guard, and interrogate. Everybody knew it, and John was the fall guy. The reason it's still going on, and this is 2009, I guess, was to threaten him to being silent due to several senior generals were in the know. Number 4, 2009, John was not criminally charged with anything but a DUI. He fucked up and was punished under UCMJ. So who gives a fuck? His head is on straight now. In my book, this is a win. And number 5, saying you were a sergeant major is like saying you know how to drive. You lost your license, but you can still drive. Chicken shit, small ball. And then it mentioned on a side note, the Singleton missions. I saw John in Baghdad go out and return from solo in Baghdad. they will bring this up as impossible. I have experience with this in OIF and OEF. So if any of that made sense to you, there is an outside story because people will approach anonymously due to the fact that the other day, whoever this Nikki MGTV, who's actually in the Navy, but a fellow I know is in the Navy and he likes his shows, put on a guy, Clay something. You'll have to go look up Nikki MGTV. And this guy, Clay, who I think was naked throughout the entire video, which is what do you expect, right? Was in a Green Beret unit at the time that John McPhee was talking about all this stuff going on. And he had no kind words for the guy in the tank top or anybody else who was bringing, first of all, the same thing. Why are you bringing up the hostage stuff? Better leave sleeping dogs lie, right? And then goes on a bit, and there's accusations in there that the other guy maybe sat in the office a long time and didn't really go out on in the field. There's a bunch of that. Retaliating tank top went out and pulled this guy's arrest record for assault. It says he assaulted a child or something like that. So that's what he throws out in response to this other nude reasoned argument. So then that guy has to come back. I mean, this is for real. I'm telling you, this is for real. Not that we wouldn't see this in the Democratic House, right? The other guy comes back and says, "Oh, thanks for bringing that up. That was a dick move. And it was due to the assault charge that was dropped when a bunch of kids threw fireworks at my son. And maybe the one who was close to 18 got smacked around. He didn't go into it because the charges were dropped." And when you see somebody who's going to put stuff out knowing that the charges were dropped, that's when you're going to start to see stuff that I'm familiar with when we talk about framing people so that they cannot come back and make a coherent defense for themselves because you've already poisoned the well, as they will say. So at that point, let's get back. Now you see what's going on, right? At no point have I seen, and I put it on their site a few times, and in fact, a few of the other ones too, because so many people have jumped on the wagon who were all just clout chasing guys. Like I said, once again, that Jameson's guy, what piece of garbage, right? Didn't read anything. I know we've all asked for the 200 to 300 pages of documentation to be put into a Dropbox account so that everybody could see them. That would have been a good thing. And also that every dollar that anyone is making off of this series, including the Tim Kennedy ones, where we know Tim is completely guilty as well, all that should have been going to, I don't know, Green Beret Foundation. And as I mentioned, you could put it in the name of John Caviani if you want to have a real Green Beret and a real Sergeant Major, I think. So that was a good one. I don't see anybody doing it. But that's how these things are going to happen, okay? So that's where we are. I would say look at this Nikki MGT, because the funny thing with him, there was an explosion over in Tank Top World and threatened people with lawsuits. And my dad's a lawyer and I have a degree from a college I've never heard of and all this other nonsense because you're flailing around because you're considering yourself, I am the arbiter of truth. I am the one who is the gatekeeper, the badge protector, whatever I am. You don't stack up to what I want. And then you go onto another channel, which is a sister channel, and says, this guy beat up some girl. Is that what you call a war hero? If we were fighting women, yes, I would. People have to get over the fact that guys that are good in a war situation may not be good in real life. It happens in any number of trades. There are guys that are excellent bricklayers that probably go home and slap their kids around. There are women that are artists. There are women that are whatever the fuck, heads of security somewhere. Have all these jobs out there. And you look at that person, you say, that's the best person that they have. Outstanding, good work. But then they go home and whatever, they shit on their carpet and pretend they're a dog. Separate the two, guys. You can't have it all the way around. Look at the case of Audie Murphy. That's all I'll say. Look at the case of Audie Murphy. Did he ever pull guns on people? Did he ever get blackout drunk and pull guns on people? Was he hard to deal with when he came back? World's most decorated soldier or whatever he was? Yes. Did that make him less of a soldier? Not at the time when he was out there knocking Germans down left, right, and center, standing on a burning tank. You guys have to realize that once you're out of an organization, police, fire, Coast Guard, anything, Kiwanis Club, when you're no longer in the head of the Kiwanis Club, things are different. Nobody cares. Okay. You can't keep reliving the old days and making yourself out to be white knights when we're not in a white knight business out there. Right? Look what the Pope's up to. So then you have to say to yourself, well, what's going on? Why are we really having these kind of things? And what is going on with this? And why do people get dragged into reputational knife fights where all you're doing is trying to control a narrative? You're not worried about the truth anymore. As what was his name from A Few Good Men, because you can't handle the truth, as we always say. So we're talking about this whole thing, like I said, with MCPHEE, right? He has very little to do with the overall fight that's going on. Bear with me. I'll try to be very quick because I know the viewing audience, right? Supposedly for stolen valor, okay? The issue that keeps coming up more than anything else, first of all, the girlfriend abuse, which is mentioned on page 2 of 2 pages. Page 2 of 2 pages does not have any type of header on it that puts it with page 1, which is the removal of his Special Forces tab and beret. Page 2 is dealing with something that would be considered domestic battery, possibly sexual assault, because once again, these are not the correct documents that would have gone with this. If you looked at the charge list, right? It was adultery, having sex with a married woman in your command. Probably he was a higher rank too. So that's what he went down for. To continue to bring this other stuff up is done in a number of cases, and probably in this one as well, that you are trying to say, hey, command fucked up. Command were a bunch of pussies. They should have taken him for this, and that, because under, I won't say universal code, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, if you look up adultery and you look up saxophone assault and you look up domestic abuse, things like that, I don't think I can say any of those words, but you know what I'm talking about. If you were to do that, you would find out that they are standalone charges. Nobody would roll the other 2 into adultery. So it makes no sense. This FOIA request, that it's out there, makes me feel that some of these documents were fed into this person by a friend or associate over there at wherever the Green Berets all hide out. Okay. And they got this somehow other way, some of the documents, because there should also have been more redactions in there than there were, because I understand where they were going, where they say about grapes, right? And the idea was, since it was mentioned in a very recent video by one of these sister clubs, woman in question, I'm assuming it's the married woman from the command, was a habitual pharmaceutical abuser and took a certain amount of drugs every night before a certain time and was rendered fairly inoperable. At which point it seems that MCPHEE had sex with her during that time period. I don't know if he was coherent or not coherent, because you don't get the full story, because why would you put the full story when you're out there changing a narrative? And he said he felt like he was a graper, because I guess she started nodding out and he didn't, I guess he finished, whatever the fact, there is no charge on that sheet that is associated with this. Okay. Because they have a question in there. You can look it up yourself as to at what part is you cannot, it's a consent issue. I'm not a lawyer, but what's funny is Mickey MTG or whatever is going to have a military lawyer on his show soon. And I'm sure it is to blow up the story that the Tank Top has been putting out there. Because I would tell you that second page of documentation, no effing way, that would just be sitting there without pages around it to explain what the hell was going on if this is an adultery case. because that's what you're removing the guy's tab and Green Beret for, is adultery. Having sex with a woman, married woman, who is in the command and probably at a lower rank than yourself. All right. So this other stuff is just additional gravy on the fucking sad French fries that they're giving you at this diner. Okay. So you're making him a symbol of misconduct. Your detractors, which are these guys, can relitigate how America treated detainees pretty soon, because that's going to be the next step. What did he do to the detainees? This is before Abu Ghraib once again. There are generals that are still in the command who were probably colonels at the time who are going to look like fucking savages if this continues. So why would you continue it, right? Unless you're trying to embarrass the command. That would be my take, because the other channel, they fluctuate between saying in the unit and being in the Green Berets. At which time is which going on? Clarify your story, right? Once again, McPhee does not make a big thing out of being in special forces. He doesn't seem to be having a good time there. He was sent there, right? You hear this other guy say they wouldn't have gone in. They were Rangers, and then they would go into this unit, Delta Force, whatever. So you're implying stolen valor to something the guy doesn't really give a shit about. The Sergeant Major thing's the only thing that comes up, and the constant use of Sean Ryan videos, which he says retired special operations. I'm sorry, retired special operations Sergeant Major. So he's only got one little part of that lie in there, the Sergeant Major part, if that is how it works. So that's why I'm worried about command. That's how I have to look at this, right? Which is, you can see two tactical ends here. The first, you get to discredit the chain of command now that you're out. You can show whoever the officer was in charge, right? This guy, John, was disciplined, but kept in service. So critics would imply complicity up the ladder, meaning whoever was in charge of handling this, who quietly pushed him out of that unit to the Green Berets, knew he did all this monstrous shit, which is yet to be proven. Okay? So it's not one man's misconduct, it's the command climate itself. So this can be considered an indictment of the command structure during this war of terror up to that point, which is dangerous fucking ground to want to be playing on, right? Because that's what it looks like. Secondly, we reopened the POW debate. Before Abu Ghraib, prisoner treatment was already radioactive. Ask anybody, okay? Resurrecting these ghosts, which is what they are, now suggests the military's moral compromises weren't accidents, they were systemic. Because now you have a different group. You don't have these, wherever those guys are from, buttfuck Egypt, Alabama, who were out there running that jail. Now you have the cream of the crop, the A-team. And they're out there fucking up prisoners, right? So that shows a systematic chain of abuse of prisoners of war under that administration and under that chain of command. Is that really where you guys want to go? Because that's where you've gone as far as I can see. That would be the letter I would send over to Green Beret Central. And the payoff is, why now? You know, because attacking veterans in their service record can serve multiple political agendas. It weakens the prestige of the global war on terror veterans at a time when their credibility is still invoked in debates over the VA, foreign policy, and defense budgets. If they weren't so fairly well organized and beatified, most of this movement wouldn't have gone on at all until you were under the Trump administration. Say what you want. Joe Biden gives zero fucks about the veterans. Obama, great. He was able to sit there and stand and salute some dead people for a little while. That doesn't get you your VA benefits. That does not change foreign policy. It does not change defense budgets. It delegitimizes the authority figures who use their service as moral capital. Sorry, a little annoyed. If you can show one colonel or sergeant major was complicit in abuse, you chip away at the authority of every general and politician who wears some type of ribbon rack, okay? Not that that makes you a good politician or general, but if you were a general or you were a politician who served during a time where it is now considered that we were, whatever, rounding up prisoners, throwing them in a sack and drowning them like kittens, yes, it does. Okay. It takes away from the moral authority. It shifts the public gaze. Instead of today's scandals, we're being dragged back into the shadow of what, 2002? Half your viewers weren't alive then. You know, half your viewers weren't alive in 2002. And the suggestion that the system has been corrupt all this time. Okay. And for the one guy, or both of them, the other guy who was in that unit that McPhee was in, who comes in, I guess, at a later time period, you now have a generational issue where you're fucking the generation before you without them having any recourse because you've already got the upper hand. You've got your show, you're well known, I guess, whatever the story is. I don't know. Maybe he's getting tunnel vision, I would guess. You know, I think it was kind of silly to get drug into this. You should have stopped at Tim Kennedy, but oh well, what do I know? But the real genius in this is how this strategy divides things, okay? By accusing one veteran of stolen valor and abuse, detractors force the community to split. Some will defend them, others will denounce them, unless it's like totally out of control like Kennedy's. That infighting erodes collective credibility. And when enough cases circulate, suspicion becomes normal. Every medal, every war story, every honorable discharge now comes with a question mark. That's not a bug, that's the design. If you had looked at, there was a channel called Vet TV, I guess it's still on. They did a short movie on there with somebody from one of these other influencer shows. I think it was Donut Operator or something, where it's a guy and they want to bestow a medal on this officer, I think it is. And it turns out that the guy is a total maniac, but yet the medal goes through, right? That the facts did not meet the situation, blah, blah, blah. And that's what goes on. So now everything will be questioned. Everybody, every medal, every story, everything, because of this type of stuff, because of the literary freedoms that were taken on a series of books that we all know about. So everything now becomes part of that series of books. So nobody did anything right or brave in the war, because if these guys aren't doing right or brave, then the average Joe couldn't be right or brave, which also is an entirely other thing where it's an arrogance that only us special elite people can be brave or whatever else. When I know a number of general, regular old Marines and infantry guys, Fallujah, places like this, are getting chewed the fuck up and fighting very hard without being able to leave, without being able to get flown in and flown out, right? So you're causing additional problems amongst the whatever you're going to call it, the branches, between the branches in your own force, where they're like, fuck these guys, right? They talk all this shit where I'm out there sitting there, you know, doing whatever, and they're sitting here saying this other nonsense. Well, I don't want to hear it, which is what you'll hear from some of these regular Marines and regular infantry types. Okay. So you got to follow, there's a list of beneficiaries to this, which is, you know, old rivals, career enemy guys, stuff like that. You have political agitators out there now that want to always prove that the global war on terror was at its core an abusive terror show. That's the anti-war activists and all that. A number of people who were sucked into the war because they had joined the Army or the Air Force to learn computers, never thinking that they'd actually go to war. These guys then turn around afterwards because now they are veterans and can stick it up the ass of the government whenever possible. Hey, it's a job. Okay. You have scandal entrepreneurs, obviously. There's foreign adversaries who are going to fit into some of this stuff somewhere. So there, it's not just about, like I said, it's not about humiliating John McPhee. It's not about that. The one with, like I said, the earlier ones, obvious. I didn't kill bin Laden. Neither did that guy. The Kennedy guy, total bullshit completely across the board. The stuff that they're catching this guy on, you know, tall tale, like you see the other thing, tour aboard, tall tales. but whatever. The reason that you have to use Ryan's show and not Joe Rogan's show, if you notice, nobody ever talks about Joe Rogan's show with this. When he was on Rogan, all he did was talk about jujitsu and shit like that. There was nothing there for you. He talked about the other stuff on the Ryan show because Ryan's into that. They spoke about the conspiracy as to why nobody killed bin Laden at the beginning of the war, because it would hurt the military industrial complex. There were some good statements being made by the fella in there, ignoring the tall tales, which would also have people who are involved in military complex very unhappy because you're like, hey, you're not supposed to know that we drag these wars out for no reason. Ukraine, right? So the clout chasing, it's on the surface. The deeper game is making yourself the authority by which all other people are judged in your little universe, in your little bro vet universe. Average people are going to see through this after the second or third thing. You've made your money by now, or you haven't made your money by now. You really ought to lay it down. Tank Top, I think, is going to be the one that takes the biggest hit because he's not as well set up as a couple of these other ones. The one guy, I haven't seen him. I forget what the hell his name is, so I'm not going to say, but he's usually good on calling bullshit. Haven't seen him. I guess he's staying out of this one. But this is the kind of stuff that's going to just totally disintegrate an organization on a generational basis, which is what this is about. The guys that were at the beginning of global war on terror, the guys that were at the end of global war on terror, the guys that are there today, the guys that were there before it started. You know, they say what they want about Jocko because Jocko Willing, whatever the fuck his name is, kind of hokey, but he's just restructuring stuff that he stole from Kyle Lamb. It looks like because Kyle Lamb, I think, had a book out before him, and the SEALs have better agents than the Army. But the fact of the matter is, he brought on a group from what's called the MCPHEE SOG, which is an old, real special operations organization from Vietnam. Nobody but nobody says a bad thing about those guys. They don't even care. They'll tell you stories about the guy threatening other guys with guns when they're drunk and sicking a dog on somebody, shit like that. They don't go and say he should have his MCPHEE SOG, whatever, medal removed. Because obviously, you know, they understand what it is to do what they're doing. They're not worried about what happens to you after you get out to the world again. And that is the issue. This is all very, very in bad taste. This reminds you of a really bad version of the Lords of Discipline. You know, the 10, we are the ones who say, what is this military establishment? Bullshit. It's not how it works. If you want to see a decent movie or read a good book, Lords of Discipline definitely is in this vein, even though this follows that because that book was put out 25 years ago, whatever. So anyway, that's enough of this shit for the time being. Hopefully there'll be no more. But once again, if you see or are on any of these sites, ask these guys how much money they've donated to the Green Beret Foundation. How much of the money that they brought in has gone to benefit the families of dead, wounded, whatever, Green Berets, because that's the only reason you could say that you would keep this going. And even then, it's a stupid reason to do it. Same with the documents. Let's see the 200 to 300 documents. Then we can figure out which ones came out of FOIA. You'll figure it out real fucking quick because of the redactions that weren't on that other sheet. So let's frame these framers the way they should be seen. And that is with a little bit of honesty. Nobody's saying that John's a saint. Nobody's saying he didn't deserve what he got. But a lot of people are saying, you're making a big thing out of nothing. You know, you can't go back and fight. You want to fight every lawsuit that didn't go your way, every civil case that didn't go your way, every criminal case that didn't go your way. What the hell use is that? It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So that's about all. Have a good Saturday and Sunday and enjoy yourselves. Bye.